Sarah gripped the edge of her kitchen counter, staring at the divorce papers. After 15 years of marriage, Mark had finally made good on his threat to leave. She'd known it was coming. Their arguments had grown more frequent, their silences longer, their connection thinner with each passing month. Still, seeing it there in black and white made her stomach clench. "Mom? Is everything okay?" 12-year-old Lily stood in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, concern etched across her face. Sarah quickly folded the papers and tucked them into a drawer. "Everything's fine, sweetie. Just some bills. How was school?" The lie came easily, but Sarah knew she'd have to tell Lily and her 15-year-old brother Jason soon. Mark had moved out 3 weeks ago, claiming he needed space to think. Now it was clear he wasn't coming back. That night, after the kids went to bed, Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She scrolled through her phone contacts, wondering who she could call. Her parents lived 2 states away. Her sister was dealing with a newborn. Her close friends had gradually disappeared over the years, something she now recognized as a warning sign of how isolated she'd become in her marriage. Sarah had given up her job as a physical therapist when Jason was born, planning to return after a few years. But Mark's career had taken off, and they'd agreed she would stay home with the kids. Now, at 42, she had a 15-year gap in her resume and no clear path forward. The next morning, after getting the kids off to school, Sarah forced herself to shower and dress instead of crawling back into bed. She sat down at the computer and opened her resume file, staring at the outdated information. Where would she even begin? The mortgage on their suburban home was substantial. Mark had promised financial support, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. She needed to stand on her own feet. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mark, coming by at 6 to talk to the kids. "Thought you should know." No discussion, no asking if it was a good time. Just informing her of his decision. Sarah felt a flash of anger, followed immediately by fear. How would Jason and Lily react? They knew things had been tense, but neither suspected their father was leaving for good. The hours ticked by too quickly. Sarah tried to prepare dinner, but her stomach was in knots. At 5:30, Jason walked through the door, headphones on, barely acknowledging her. Lily arrived 15 minutes later, chattering about a science project. Sarah listened, nodding automatically, her mind racing ahead to the conversation that would change their lives. At precisely 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Sarah wiped her sweaty palms on her jeans before opening the door. Mark stood there, looking both familiar and like a stranger. He'd gotten a haircut, was wearing a new shirt she'd never seen. "Hi," he said, his voice formal. "Are they both home?" Sarah nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "In the kitchen. I was just making dinner. I've already eaten." Of course he had. The family meeting went exactly as terribly as Sarah had feared. Jason stormed out halfway through, slamming his bedroom door. Lily sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. Mark spoke in practiced phrases that sounded like they came from a self-help book. "Sometimes people grow apart, and we both still love you very much, and this doesn't change how I feel about you too." After he left, promising to call tomorrow to arrange weekend visits, Sarah sat between her children on the couch. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Lily leaned her head against Sarah's shoulder. "What happens now?" she asked in a small voice. Sarah wished she had an answer that would make everything better, but all she had was the truth. "I don't know exactly, but we're going to figure it out together." That night, after both kids had retreated to their rooms, Sarah found herself alone again. She opened her laptop and typed "physical therapy recertification requirements" into the search bar. Then she created a new folder on her desktop labeled "Fresh Start." It was a small thing, barely a beginning, but it was something. As she crawled into bed, exhausted yet unable to sleep, Sarah realized that tomorrow would be the first day of her new life. A life she hadn't chosen, but would somehow have to build from scratch. The thought was terrifying, but as she stared at the ceiling, another feeling surfaced beneath the fear, a tiny flicker of determination that refused to be extinguished. 2 months later, Sarah sat in her car outside the community college, gripping the steering wheel. She'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, watching students walk past. Most were much younger than her, but she occasionally spotted someone her age or older, which gave her a small boost of courage. The meeting with an academic advisor was scheduled to start in 10 minutes. Sarah had spent the previous week researching what it would take to reactivate her physical therapy license. The requirements were daunting: continuing education credits, supervised clinical hours, and an exam, but not impossible. This meeting was her first concrete step. She finally forced herself to get out of the car. As she walked across the parking lot, her phone buzzed. A text from Jason. Dad canceled again. Says he has to work this weekend. Sarah sighed. Mark had seen the kids only twice in the past month, breaking plans more often than keeping them. Jason's messages had grown increasingly terse, while Lily still cried herself to sleep after each cancellation. The academic advisor, a woman named Denise with kind eyes and practical advice, walked Sarah through her options. With your background, you could start with a refresher course this summer. The licensing board requires 30 hours of continuing education and 1,000 supervised clinical hours, but we can help you find a placement. Sarah left the meeting with a course catalog and a tentative plan. It would take about a year to get fully recertified, working part-time around the kids' schedules. Not ideal, but possible. As she drove home, Sarah's mind raced with logistics. They could manage financially for maybe 4 more months on the separation agreement and her savings. After that, she'd need some income, even before getting her license back. Maybe she could find assistant work at a clinic, or something entirely different to pay the bills until she was certified again. When she pulled into the driveway, she noticed her neighbor Tom working in his front yard. He waved, and she waved back automatically. Tom and his wife Karen had been the first to reach out after Mark left, bringing over a lasagna and offering to help with the kids if needed. Sarah had thanked them but hadn't taken them up on it. Accepting help still felt like admitting failure. Inside, she found Jason playing video games and Lily doing homework at the kitchen table. Dad's not coming, Lily said without looking up. I know. Jason texted me. Sarah set down her papers on the counter. I had my meeting at the college today. Jason paused his game and turned around. So you're really going back to school? Just for some courses to update my license, Sarah explained. Then I can work as a physical therapist again. But who's going to be here when we get home from school? Lily asked, her voice tinged with anxiety. It was a fair question, one that Sarah had been wrestling with herself. For 15 years, she'd structured her entire life around being available for her children. The idea of changing that, even out of necessity, filled her with guilt. We'll figure it out together, Sarah said, sitting down at the table. Maybe you can go to after-school programs some days. And I'll try to schedule classes and work around your schedules as much as possible. Jason turned back to his game without commenting. Lily just nodded, but Sarah could see the worry in her eyes. That evening, after dinner, Sarah's phone rang. It was her sister Emma. How are things going? Emma asked, the sound of her baby cooing in the background. Sarah found herself telling Emma about the college visit, her concerns about childcare, and her fears about returning to work after so long. Have you thought about asking Mom and Dad for help? Emma suggested. They mentioned they might visit this summer. The idea of asking her parents for financial help made Sarah's chest tighten. I'm not there yet, she said. I want to try to figure this out on my own first. There's nothing wrong with needing help, Sarah, Emma said gently. You've always been the one helping everyone else. After they hung up, Sarah opened her laptop and created a budget spreadsheet. She ruthlessly cut expenses, cable TV, the gym membership she rarely used, the meal kit delivery service. It wouldn't be enough long-term, but it would buy her a little more time. As she worked, she heard Lily crying softly in her room. Sarah closed the laptop and went to her daughter, sitting on the edge of the bed and stroking her hair. I hate him, Lily whispered. Why doesn't he want to see us anymore? Your dad loves you, Sarah said. The words automatic even though part of her wanted to agree with Lily's anger. He's just struggling to figure out his new life too. But you still see us every day, Lily pointed out with a child's unerring logic. Sarah had no good answer for that. Instead, she lay down next to Lily, holding her until she fell asleep. The next morning, Sarah woke up early and went for a run, something she hadn't done in years. Her body protested at first, muscles stiff and lungs burning. But by the time she returned home, she felt more clear-headed than she had in weeks. While making breakfast, she noticed a flyer on the refrigerator that she'd ignored for months. The local recreation center was looking for part-time staff for their summer programs. On impulse, Sarah took down the flyer and added the phone number to her to-do list. When she called later that day, the director seemed interested in her background. We actually need someone to help with our senior fitness classes and rehab swimming program. Your physical therapy experience would be perfect, even without an active license. They arranged an interview for the following week. It wasn't a career, just a temporary step, but it was something tangible, a small piece of the puzzle falling into place. That night, as she updated her resume for the interview, Sarah realized she had made it through an entire day without crying. It wasn't much, but like the Fresh Start folder on her desktop, it was a beginning. Sarah's first day at the recreation center felt like jumping into the deep end of a pool after years of avoiding water. The director, Mike, a former college athlete with an easy smile, showed her around the facility and introduced her to the staff. Most of our senior fitness participants have been coming for years, he explained as they walked through the gym area. They're a tight-knit group, so don't be surprised if they're a bit standoffish at first. Sarah nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Her black pants and blue polo shirt, the unofficial uniform Mike had suggested, felt strange after years of casual mom clothes. Even stranger was the employee badge clipped to her shirt, with a hastily taken photo and her name printed below. Her first class was senior chair yoga, a gentle session designed for older adults with limited mobility. As the participants filed in, Sarah smiled and greeted each one, receiving mostly curious stares in return. "Where's Diane?" asked a white-haired woman with bright red lipstick, settling into a chair in the front row. Diane moved to Florida to be closer to her daughter, Sarah explained, remembering what Mike had told her. "I'm Sarah, the new instructor." The woman looked Sarah up and down. "Well, you don't look like you know much about arthritis, but we'll see what you've got." By the end of the hour, Sarah had won over most of the group with her knowledge of joint-friendly movements and her patient approach. The red lipstick woman, who introduced herself as Eleanor, lingered after class. "You've done this before," she stated, more observation than question. "I used to be a physical therapist," Sarah admitted. "I'm working on getting recertified." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "About time they hired someone who knows what they're doing. My husband had physical therapy after his stroke. Made all the difference." She paused, studying Sarah's face. "You're new to the area?" "No, I've lived here for 12 years. Just new to working again." Something in Sarah's tone must have revealed more than she intended. Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "Well, you did good today. See you Thursday." It wasn't exactly warm acceptance, but it felt like a small victory. The following weeks fell into a rhythm. Sarah worked mornings at the recreation center, took an online course during the kids' school hours, and was home when they returned. The arrangement wasn't perfect. There were still meals eaten in the car between activities, homework done late at night, and moments when everyone's patience wore thin, but they were managing. One Thursday after class, Eleanor approached Sarah again. "My arthritis group meets for coffee after class on Thursdays. You should join us sometime." Sarah was touched by the invitation, but shook her head. "Thanks, but I need to get home for my kids." "Bring them," Eleanor said simply. "The cafe has good muffins." So the next Thursday, Sarah texted Jason and Lily to meet her at the Cornerstone Cafe after school. She was surprised when they both showed up. Jason had been increasingly distant, spending more time with friends and less at home. The arthritis group had pushed together several tables, with Eleanor holding court at the center. When Sarah arrived with her children, Eleanor immediately made room for them. "Everyone, this is Sarah's son and daughter. Jason and Lily, right?" Sarah was startled that Eleanor remembered their names from the few times she'd mentioned them. The group embraced Jason and Lily without hesitation. One man, a retired teacher named Bill, engaged Jason in a conversation about video games, while Lily was drawn into helping another woman named Margaret with a crochet project she'd brought along. Sarah sat back, watching in amazement as her children relaxed in the company of these seniors. It was the first time in months she'd seen Jason smile so openly or Lily so engaged with someone outside their immediate family. "They're good kids," Eleanor commented, sliding into the chair next to Sarah. "Going through a rough patch?" "Their dad and I are getting divorced," Sarah said quietly, still finding the words difficult to say aloud. Eleanor didn't offer platitudes or prying questions. She simply nodded. "My husband left me for his secretary when our kids were teenagers." Classic cliché. "How did you manage?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. "One day at a time. Sometimes 1 hour at a time." Eleanor stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "I went back to teaching. Found these old folks." She gestured around the table with a smile. "Made a new life." The simple truth of it, that life goes on, that new connections form, that wounds eventually heal, settled over Sarah like a warm blanket. As they were leaving the cafe, Bill pulled Sarah aside. "My wife runs the PT department at County Hospital. They're always looking for good people. Want me to put in a word?" Sarah was momentarily speechless. I don't have my license reactivated yet." "So? They have technician positions, administrative roles. Get your foot in the door, make connections." He scribbled a name and number on a napkin and pressed it into her hand. No pressure, just an option. On the walk home, Lily skipped ahead while Jason walked beside Sarah, unusually talkative about Bill's stories of early computer programming. "Those people are pretty cool," he said finally. "For old folks." Sarah smiled. "They are, aren't they?" That weekend, Sarah called the number Bill had given her. The following week, she had an interview at County Hospital for a part-time administrative position in the physical therapy department, one that would work with her class schedule and offer tuition assistance for healthcare-related courses. When she got the job offer, the first person she called was Eleanor. "I don't know how to thank you and Bill," she said. "Don't thank us," Eleanor replied. "Just pay it forward someday." The position at the hospital changed everything. Not just financially, though the regular paycheck and benefits eased Sarah's most immediate worries. The biggest change was in how she saw herself. No longer just Mark's ex-wife or Jason and Lily's mom, but Sarah Mitchell, capable of standing on her own. At dinner that night, she shared the news with the kids. "I'll still be home when you get back from school most days," she assured them. "But I might need your help with some things around the house." "Does this mean we can get a dog now?" Lily asked hopefully. It was a long-standing request that Mark had always vetoed. Sarah laughed. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. One big change at a time." Later, as she was loading the dishwasher, Jason lingered in the kitchen. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "I'm sorry I've been such a jerk lately." Sarah turned to look at her son, suddenly struck by how tall he'd grown. "You haven't been a jerk. You've been going through a lot." "So have you," he pointed out. "But you're still, handling everything." The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to Sarah's eyes. "I'm trying," she said. "We're all trying." Jason nodded, then gave her a quick, awkward hug before retreating to his room. That night, Sarah updated her Fresh Start folder, adding folders for hospital job, licensing requirements, and budget. As she worked, she realized that the knot of anxiety that had lived in her chest since Mark left had loosened. It wasn't gone entirely, but it no longer consumed her every waking moment. She wasn't naive enough to think the road ahead would be easy. There would still be days when it all felt overwhelming, when the juggling act failed, when the reality of her new life hit hard. But for the first time, Sarah believed that she could handle whatever came next, not just survive it, but perhaps even thrive. 3 months into her job at County Hospital, Sarah had settled into a new routine. Her desk in the PT department's administrative office was decorated with photos of Jason and Lily, a small plant from Eleanor, and a calendar meticulously marked with work hours, class schedules, and the kids' activities. "Sarah, do you have the Peterson file?" Dr. Kaminsky, the department head, leaned against her doorway. Rachel Kaminsky was a brisk, efficient woman in her 50s who ran the department with precision but treated her staff with genuine respect. "Right here," Sarah replied, handing over the file. "And I've scheduled his follow-up for next Thursday, as you requested." Rachel nodded approvingly. "You're really getting the hang of our systems. How are your classes going?" "Good. I just passed my anatomy refresher with an A." Sarah couldn't help the note of pride in her voice. Studying after the kids went to bed, often until midnight, had been exhausting but worth it. "Not surprised. Your clinical instincts are still sharp." Rachel hesitated, then added, "We have a PT assistant position opening next month. You should apply. It would be more hands-on while you finish your recertification." The offer caught Sarah off guard. "But I don't have my license yet." "You don't need a full license for the assistant role. Just your background and the courses you're taking now." Rachel shrugged. "Think about it. The pay's better too." After Rachel left, Sarah sat back in her chair, mind racing. A PT assistant position would be a significant step up. More responsibility, more patient interaction, and as Rachel had pointed out, better pay. But it would also mean more hours and a less flexible schedule. At home that evening, Sarah brought it up during dinner. "I'd need to rearrange some things," she explained as she passed the salad bowl. "I might not be home every day when you get back from school." Jason shrugged, mouth full of pasta. I'm 15, Mom. I can look after myself. What about me? Lily asked. Her fork paused midway to her mouth. You could go to the after-school program some days, Sarah suggested. Or maybe Mrs. Rodriguez next door could help occasionally. Their elderly neighbor had repeatedly offered to watch Lily if needed. Or Dad could finally step up, Jason muttered. Sarah gave him a warning look. Mark's relationship with the kids remained a sore point. He saw them every other weekend, more regularly now than in the first few months, but remained largely disconnected from their daily lives. Let's just focus on our plans, Sarah said. This would be a good opportunity for me. Later, after Lily was in bed, Sarah found Jason sitting at the kitchen counter with a bowl of ice cream. Hey, she said, grabbing a spoon and stealing a bite. You okay with all this? Jason looked up from his phone. All what? The changes. Me working more. You having to be more independent. He was quiet for a moment. It's weird, he finally said. But not bad weird. You seem, I don't know, different. Different how? Happier, I guess. Even though everything's harder. His observation startled her. Was she happier? Despite the financial stress, the constant juggling of responsibilities, and the lingering pain of her failed marriage? She considered it, then nodded slowly. I think I am. Not all the time. But I'm getting there. Jason pushed his bowl toward her, offering the last few bites. Then it's cool. We're cool. The following Monday, Sarah submitted her application for the PT assistant position. 2 weeks later, after an interview with Rachel and the hospital's HR director, she was offered the job. It would start in January, after the holiday break, giving her time to adjust her class schedule and make arrangements for Lily. December brought unusually heavy snow, turning their neighborhood into a postcard-perfect winter scene. It also brought their first Christmas as a divided family. Mark had suggested splitting the day, morning with him, evening with Sarah, which seemed reasonable until he announced he'd be bringing his new girlfriend, Vanessa. Absolutely not, Sarah had said firmly during their phone call. It's too soon. It's been almost a year, Sarah, Mark had argued. Vanessa is part of my life now. The kids need to accept that. The kids need time to adjust to one major change before you throw another at them. Christmas is already going to be hard enough. In the end, they'd compromised. Mark would have the kids Christmas Eve, alone, and Sarah would have them Christmas Day. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best solution they could find. On Christmas Eve morning, Sarah stood at the window watching Mark's car pull up. Jason and Lily gathered their overnight bags, faces a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Have fun, Sarah said, hugging them both. I'll see you tomorrow morning. After they left, she stood in the suddenly quiet house, fighting the urge to crawl back into bed. Instead, she changed into workout clothes and headed to the recreation center, where Mike had organized a staff holiday workout followed by lunch. The physical activity helped clear her mind, and the company of her co-workers, now friends, kept her from dwelling on the empty house waiting for her. By the time she returned home that evening, she felt steadier. She spent the night wrapping the last few presents and preparing food for the next day. Her budget hadn't allowed for extravagant gifts, but she'd managed to find things the kids would appreciate. New headphones for Jason and art supplies for Lily. Christmas morning, Mark dropped the kids off early. They burst through the door full of stories about the previous day's activities and the gifts they'd received. If they'd met Vanessa despite the agreement, they didn't mention it, and Sarah didn't ask. The day was quieter than previous Christmases, but no less warm. They opened presents, played board games, and watched holiday movies. In the afternoon, Eleanor stopped by with cookies, followed by their neighbors Tom and Karen with a small gift for each of them. See, Lily said as they waved goodbye to the neighbors. We still have people who care about us. The simple observation brought a lump to Sarah's throat. Yes, we do, she agreed. More than I realized. As January approached, bringing with it Sarah's new position and a fresh semester of classes, she found herself looking forward rather than back. The pain of her divorce hadn't disappeared, but it had become a part of her story rather than its defining chapter. One evening, as she reviewed her calendar for the upcoming month, Lily peered over her shoulder. You've got something scheduled every single day, Lily observed. When do you have time for fun? Sarah laughed. Some of these things are fun. Like what? Like, Sarah scanned the calendar. Like my coffee with Eleanor on Thursdays, and your art class on Wednesdays. She had enrolled Lily in an after-school program that aligned with her own late shift. That's my fun, Not yours, Lily pointed out. She had a point. Sarah had become so focused on moving forward, on work, education, and keeping the family functioning, that she'd put her own enjoyment on hold. Maybe I need to schedule some fun, she admitted. Mom needs fun, Lily announced to Jason when he wandered into the kitchen looking for a snack. Groundbreaking news, he teased, but there was affection in his voice. What kind of fun? Sarah thought about it. I used to love hiking, and reading books that weren't textbooks, and going to concerts. So do those things again, Jason said, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. Maybe it was. Sarah added a note to her January calendar. Schedule fun. It felt both silly and significant, a reminder that rebuilding her life meant more than just meeting responsibilities. It meant rediscovering joy, too. That night, lying in bed, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come since those first devastating days after Mark left. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were creating something new. It wasn't the life she had planned or expected, but increasingly, it was a life she valued, one she had built herself, piece by piece, choice by choice. The thought carried her into sleep, more peaceful than anxious for the first time in longer than she could remember. Spring arrived with a burst of activity. Sarah's new position as a physical therapy assistant kept her busier than ever, but she found the hands-on work deeply satisfying. Each patient interaction reminded her why she'd chosen this field in the first place, the tangible difference she could make in someone's recovery, the relationships built through consistent care. Her licensing recertification was progressing steadily. She had completed most of the required courses and had started accumulating supervised clinical hours. Dr. Kaminsky had become something of a mentor, offering guidance and occasionally adjusting schedules to help Sarah balance work and education. One Tuesday afternoon, Sarah was helping a middle-aged man named David through a series of exercises following knee replacement surgery. He was a high school science teacher, and they had fallen into an easy rapport over the past few weeks. "How's the pain today?" Sarah asked as she guided him through a gentle knee flexion. "Better," David grimaced slightly, though that's a relative term. "Recovery isn't linear," Sarah reminded him. "Some days are better than others." David nodded. "A bit like life, I suppose." He paused his movement, studying her face. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." Sarah hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Divorce, not surgery. But yes, definitely a recovery process." "Ah," David said, resuming his exercise. "Been there. For years ago for me." Something in his tone, not bitter, just matter of fact, made Sarah curious. "Does it get easier?" "Everyone keeps telling me it gets easier." "It gets different," he said thoughtfully. "The sharp edges wear down. You build new patterns. Eventually, you realize you've gone a whole day without thinking about it, and that feels like a victory." It was one of the most honest answers she'd received. Not dismissive positivity or dire warnings, just the simple truth of someone who had walked a similar path. As they finished the session, David mentioned a support group at the community center. "It's not just for newly divorced people. Some of us have been dealing with it for years. It helps to share experiences, practical advice. No pressure, but you might find it useful." Sarah thanked him and tucked the information away, not sure if she would follow up. She had been managing on her own, and the idea of sitting in a circle sharing feelings with strangers seemed uncomfortable. That weekend, Mark picked up the kids for their regular visit. As they were leaving, he lingered awkwardly at the door. "Sarah, I wanted to let you know." He cleared his throat. "Vanessa and I are getting married in June." The news hit her with unexpected force. Not because she wanted Mark back. Those feelings had faded as her anger and hurt had evolved into something more like indifference. But the finality of it, the speed with which he had rebuilt his life while she was still piecing hers together bit by bit, stung. "Congratulations," she managed, proud that her voice remained steady. "We'd like the kids to be part of the ceremony," he continued. "I wanted to talk to you first, make sure you're comfortable with that." Sarah wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Comfortable? Of course, she wasn't comfortable with her children participating in their father's wedding to the woman he had left them for. But she swallowed her initial reaction. "I think that should be their decision," she said finally. "They're old enough to choose." After Mark and the kids left, Sarah found herself restless, the apartment suddenly too quiet, too empty. On impulse, she dug out the information about the support group David had mentioned. There was a meeting that evening. The community center was only partially filled when Sarah arrived, feeling self-conscious and out of place. She recognized David immediately, talking with a small group near the coffee table. He spotted her and waved her over. "Sarah, glad you made it," he said warmly. "Let me introduce you to some people." The group was more diverse than Sarah had expected. Men and women ranging from their late 20s to their 60s, some recently separated, others divorced for years. They gathered in a loose circle, and the facilitator, a family therapist named Diane, started with a check-in. When it was Sarah's turn, she found herself sharing more than she had intended, not just about Mark's wedding announcement, but about her ongoing struggles to balance work, education, and parenting. "The practical stuff I can handle," she admitted. "It's the emotional weight that catches me off guard sometimes." Several people nodded in understanding. A woman named Tessa spoke up. "I remember feeling like I was doing fine. Then my ex sent out wedding invitations, and I cried for 3 days straight. It's not that I wanted him back. It was more like he had moved on to chapter 2, and I was still stuck in the epilogue of chapter 1. The metaphor resonated with Sarah. That's exactly how it felt. As if Mark had simply closed the book on their marriage and started a fresh story while she was still processing the ending. After the meeting, David invited Sarah to join a few of them for coffee at a nearby cafe. She hesitated, aware that Lily was at a sleepover and Jason was with friends, leaving her evening unexpectedly free. "I should probably get home," she said automatically, then reconsidered. "Actually, yes, coffee would be nice." The conversation over coffee flowed easily, touching on everything from co-parenting challenges to dating disasters to the unexpected freedoms that came with starting over. Sarah found herself laughing more than she had in months. As the evening wound down, David walked her to her car. "I'm glad you came tonight," he said. "It can be a good resource, especially at turning points." "Like when your ex announces he's remarrying?" Sarah asked wryly. "Exactly like that." David smiled. "Or when you realize you're ready to move forward yourself." There was a question in his words, subtle but unmistakable. Sarah felt a flutter of something. Not quite nervousness, not quite excitement, but a blend of both. "I'm not sure I'm there yet," she said honestly. David nodded, his expression understanding rather than disappointed. "That's fair. No timeline for these things." He hesitated, then added, "But when you are ready, for friendship or whatever comes next, I'd like to be part of that conversation." The directness of his interest, combined with his respect for her process, was refreshing. No pressure, no games, just clear communication. "I'd like that too," Sarah replied, surprised to find she meant it. Over the next few weeks, Sarah found herself thinking about that conversation, about the possibility of opening another door in her life. She and David exchanged occasional texts, mostly about support group meetings or physical therapy jokes. It was comfortable, undemanding, but with an undercurrent of potential that both intrigued and intimidated her. Meanwhile, the news of Mark's engagement had hit Jason and Lily differently than Sarah had anticipated. Jason, usually the more vocal in his anger toward his father, had accepted it with a shrug. "Whatever. Not like it changes anything for us." Lily, on the other hand, had been upset. "Why is he starting a new family? Doesn't he care about our family anymore?" Sarah had struggled to find the right words. "Your dad will always care about you," she said, hoping it was true. "This doesn't replace what we had. It's just different." "Different sucks," Lily had declared, stomping off to her room. Sarah couldn't argue with that assessment. One Thursday afternoon, as Sarah was finishing her shift, David appeared at the PT department doorway. "Got a minute?" he asked. Sarah glanced at the clock. "A few. What's up?" "There's a community orchestra playing at the park on Saturday," he said. "Free concert, very casual. I was wondering if you and your kids might want to join me. My daughter Emily will be there too. She's 13, just a bit older than Lily." The invitation caught Sarah by surprise. It wasn't quite a date. Including the kids made it more of a family outing. But it was a step beyond their casual interactions so far. "Let me check with them," she said. "But it sounds nice." That evening, she brought it up at dinner. "A friend from work invited us to a concert in the park on Saturday. His daughter will be there too." "What kind of friend?" Jason asked immediately, his teenage radar for parental dating situations apparently fully functional. "A work friend," Sarah clarified, feeling her cheeks warm slightly. "His name is David. He's a patient who also runs the divorce support group I've been attending." "So like a friend or a potential boyfriend?" Jason pressed. "Jason," Sarah sighed. It's just a concert in the park. As friends. With all of you there. Lily looked up from her plate. Is his daughter nice? I haven't met her yet, Sarah admitted. Her name is Emily. She's 13. Can I bring my sketch pad? Lily asked, seemingly satisfied with this minimal information. Of course. Jason was still watching Sarah with narrowed eyes. Are you ready for that? Dating and stuff? The directness of the question took Sarah aback. But she appreciated his concern, the protective instinct behind it. I'm not sure, she answered honestly. But I think I'm ready to find out. Is that okay with you too? Jason considered this, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess so. As long as he's not a jerk like Dad. Jason, Sarah warned, though without much heat. David is a nice man. It's just a concert. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But as she cleared the dinner dishes, Sarah found herself smiling at the prospect of Saturday. It wasn't a dramatic new beginning, just a small opening. A chance to explore a side of herself she had set aside during her marriage and forgotten entirely during the painful months following its end. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a sense of possibility that extended beyond survival, beyond rebuilding what was broken. Perhaps there was room in her carefully reconstructed life for something entirely new. Saturday dawned clear and warm, perfect weather for an outdoor concert. Sarah spent more time than usual deciding what to wear, finally settling on a casual sundress she hadn't worn in years. It felt strange to care about her appearance for reasons beyond professional necessity. Mom, you look pretty, Lily said when Sarah emerged from her bedroom. The simple compliment brought an unexpected flush of pleasure. Thank you, sweetie. Are you both ready? Jason looked up from his phone. I still don't get why we have to go to a boring orchestra thing. It's 2 hours outside on a nice day, Sarah reminded him. And I'm not leaving you home alone to play video games all afternoon. They arrived at the park to find it already filling with families spreading blankets on the grass. Sarah scanned the crowd, suddenly nervous. What if this was a mistake? What if the kids didn't get along? What if, Sarah? Over here. David waved from a spot near a large oak tree, where he had already set up a blanket and a small cooler. Beside him stood a girl with dark, curly hair, presumably Emily. As they made their way over, Sarah felt Jason tense beside her. She squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. Just be yourself, she whispered. No one's expecting anything. David stood to greet them, looking casual and relaxed in jeans and a button-down shirt. Glad you could make it, he said, then turned to the kids. You must be Jason and Lily. This is my daughter, Emily. Emily gave a small wave, looking as uncomfortable as Jason. Hi. An awkward silence followed, broken when Lily pulled out her sketchbook. Do you like to draw? She asked Emily directly. Emily's face brightened. Yeah, I'm not very good though. Me neither, Lily shrugged. But it's fun. Want to see what I'm working on? Just like that, the ice was broken. The two girls settled on one corner of the blanket, heads bent over Lily's sketchbook, while Jason reluctantly sat on the other side, still clutching his phone like a lifeline. Thanks for inviting us, Sarah said as she sat down beside David. It's good to get out of the house. I'm glad you came, he replied. Emily was nervous about meeting everyone, but she seems to be hitting it off with Lily already. The community orchestra was surprisingly good, playing a mix of classical pieces and more contemporary arrangements. Sarah found herself relaxing as the music washed over them. Beside her, David was a comfortable presence, close enough for conversation, but not so close as to suggest anything more than friendship. During intermission, David opened the cooler and produced sandwiches, fruit, and cookies. I thought we might get hungry, he explained. Nothing fancy. You thought ahead more than I did, Sarah admitted. I was going to suggest getting hot dogs from the stand over there. We can still do that if the kids prefer, David offered. Emily is usually suspicious of anything I make anyway. But the kids seemed content with the picnic offerings, with Emily and Lily still deep in conversation, and Jason gradually becoming more animated as David drew him out with questions about school and video games. Your son is really bright, David commented as they watched Jason explain something to Emily, his usual reserve forgotten in his enthusiasm for the topic. He reminds me of my brother at that age, taking everything in, processing it in his own way. He's had a hard time with the divorce, Sarah said quietly. Took it personally, like it was a rejection of our family rather than just the marriage. David nodded. Emily was the same way. She didn't speak to me for almost a month after I moved out. Kids that age understand. Enough to be hurt, but not enough to separate themselves from their parents' decisions. There was no judgment in his observation, just shared experience. Sarah found herself telling him about Jason's difficulties at school following the separation, the counseling sessions that had helped, and her concerns about Mark's upcoming wedding. "I want to support them being part of it if that's what they want," she explained. "But it feels like I'm being asked to facilitate something that hurts them, and me, if I'm honest." "The firsts are always the hardest," David said. "First holidays, first birthdays apart, first new partners. It gets easier to navigate over time." "That's what everyone keeps telling me," Sarah smiled. "I'm still waiting for the easier part to kick in." "Well, how about this? Is today easier than a similar day 6 months ago would have been?" Sarah considered the question. 6 months ago, the idea of sitting in a park with another man, watching her children interact with his family, would have seemed impossible, either too painful or too complicated or simply beyond her capacity to manage emotionally. "Yes," she admitted. "Today is easier. Different, but easier." "That's how it works," David said. "Not in dramatic leaps, but in small steps forward. Then one day you realize you've traveled further than you thought possible." After the concert ended, they lingered, reluctant to break the pleasant mood. Emily and Lily had exchanged phone numbers and were making plans for a future get-together. Even Jason seemed relaxed, helping to pack up the remains of their picnic. "Would you like to get dinner sometime?" David asked as they walked toward the parking lot. "Just the two of us." The question was direct but gentle, leaving room for her to decline without awkwardness. "I'd like that," Sarah replied, surprising herself with how easy the answer came. That night, after the kids were in bed, Sarah called her sister Emma. They hadn't spoken much recently. Emma's baby was now a toddler, keeping her constantly busy, and Sarah's packed schedule left little time for long conversations. "I think I went on a date today," Sarah said after they'd caught up on family news. "Sort of. The kids were there, and his daughter, so maybe not technically a date." "Tell me everything," Emma demanded. "Who is he? Where did you meet him? Do you like him?" Sarah described David, the support group, their work connection, and the concert. "He sounds nice," Emma said when Sarah finished. "Normal nice, not too good to be true nice." "He is nice," Sarah agreed. "And yes, normal nice. He has his own life, his own issues. He's not looking for someone to save or be saved by." "That's refreshing after Mark," Emma observed. Mark had always cast Sarah as either his savior or his burden, depending on his mood. "I'm not rushing into anything," Sarah assured her. "But it feels good to connect with someone who understands what I've been through." "You deserve that," Emma said firmly. And more. The following week brought a series of challenges that tested Sarah's newfound equilibrium. First, her car broke down, requiring expensive repairs that stretched her careful budget to its limit. Then Lily came down with the flu, forcing Sarah to miss 2 days of work to care for her. Finally, she received an email from Mark's lawyer requesting a meeting to discuss modifications to the custody arrangement ahead of his wedding. By Friday, Sarah was exhausted and on edge. She had rescheduled her first official date with David twice, feeling guilty but relieved when he responded with understanding rather than frustration. The meeting with Mark and his lawyer was set for Monday morning. Sarah had decided not to hire her own attorney, an expense she couldn't afford, but had spent hours researching family law and preparing her talking points. Still, the prospect of facing Mark across a conference table, possibly fighting over the children again, filled her with dread. Sunday evening, as she was reviewing her notes one last time, her phone rang. It was David. "I know you've had a rough week," he said. "I thought I'd check in and see how you're doing." The simple gesture, calling to ask how she was rather than when they could reschedule, caught Sarah off guard. She found herself telling him about the upcoming meeting, her financial concerns, and her fears about what Mark might be planning. "Would you like me to go with you?" David offered. Not as anything official, just moral support. "I could wait outside." The offer was tempting. "Thanks, but I think this is something I need to handle myself," Sarah said. "I've been letting Mark set the terms for too long. It's time I stood my ground." "I respect that," David replied. "But the offer stands if you change your mind." After they hung up, Sarah realized she felt lighter, more confident. Not because David had offered a solution, but because he had listened without judgment and respected her decision to handle things her own way. Monday morning, Sarah dressed carefully in her most professional outfit, a navy skirt suit she'd bought for job interviews. She dropped Lily at school, then drove to the downtown office building where Mark's lawyer was based. In the lobby, she took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and headed for the elevator. Whatever Mark wanted, she was prepared to advocate for herself and her children, not from a place of anger or bitterness, but from the strength she had built day by day over the past year. The receptionist directed her to a conference room where Mark was already waiting, along with his lawyer and, to Sarah's surprise, Vanessa. Seeing them together, a united front across the table, momentarily threw her off balance. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," Mark's lawyer began smoothly. "We wanted to discuss some adjustments to the visitation schedule in light of the upcoming changes to Mark's household." Sarah listened as they outlined a proposal that would actually reduce Mark's time with the children. Fewer weekends, no more Wednesday evening dinners, while adding a week-long vacation period twice a year. "I don't understand," Sarah said when they finished. "You want to see the kids less regularly?" Mark and Vanessa exchanged glances. "We're planning to relocate to Boston after the wedding," Mark explained. "Vanessa's company is transferring her, and I can work remotely. The regular visits won't be practical, but we can have longer periods together during school breaks." The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You're moving 3 hours away and didn't think to discuss this with me first? Or with Jason and Lily?" "That's why we're here now," Mark's lawyer interjected smoothly. "To work out an arrangement that serves everyone's interests." "Everyone's interests," Sarah repeated, her voice rising slightly. "What about the children's interest in having their father present in their lives consistently? Jason is starting high school next year. Lily has her dance recitals and art classes. They need stability, not vacation-style parenting a few times a year." Mark had the grace to look uncomfortable. "It's a career opportunity we can't pass up. The children will understand that. Like they understood why you left in the first place." The words escaped before Sarah could stop them. She took a deep breath, regaining her composure. "I'm not trying to be difficult, but this is a major change that affects their emotional well-being, not just a scheduling issue." The discussion continued for nearly an hour, growing increasingly tense. Sarah held firm on several points. The children would need regular video calls, not just texts. Mark would need to come back for important events, not just expect the kids to travel to him. And the financial support would need to be adjusted to account for the additional childcare Sarah would now require. By the end, they had reached a tentative agreement that Sarah could live with, though her heart ached at what this would mean for Jason and Lily. As they were wrapping up, Vanessa spoke directly to Sarah for the first time. "I want you to know that I care about your children," she said awkwardly. "I'm not trying to replace you or take them away." Sarah studied the younger woman's face, trying to see past her own complicated feelings. "They need consistency," she said finally. "Promises kept. Regular contact. Can you help make that happen?" Vanessa nodded solemnly. "I'll try." It wasn't everything Sarah wanted, but it was something, an acknowledgement of her concerns, a small bridge across the chasm of distrust. Outside the building, Sarah sat in her car for several minutes, processing what had just happened. Her carefully reconstructed life would need adjusting again. The kids would need support through another transition. But unlike a year ago, Sarah didn't feel overwhelmed by these challenges. She had resources now, inner strength, practical support systems, and the confidence that came from having already navigated difficult waters. She picked up her phone and called David. "Are you free for dinner tonight?" she asked when he answered. "I could use some good company." "I'm free," he said. "Everything okay?" "Not entirely," Sarah admitted, "but I'll get through it. I always do." As she drove away, Sarah realized that this was perhaps the most important lesson of the past year. Not that life would get easier, but that she had become stronger. Each challenge, each setback, each small victory had built a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. Whatever came next, with Mark and his new family, with her career, with David, or with the 100 other unknowns waiting in the future, Sarah would face it not as a victim of circumstance, but as the architect of her own life.